Gospel according to Luke.
Glory to you, Lord.
About 8 days after he said this, he took Peter, John, and James and went up the mountain to pray. While he was praying, his face changed in appearance, and his clothing became dazzling white. And behold, 2 men were conversing with him, Moses and Elijah, who appeared in glory and spoke of his exodus that he was going to accomplish in Jerusalem. Peter and his companions had been overcome by sleep, but becoming fully awake, they saw his glory and the 2 men standing with him. As they were about to part from him, Peter said to Jesus, "Master, it is good that we are here. Let us make 3 tents, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah." But he did not know what he was saying. While he was still speaking, a cloud came and cast a shadow over them, and they became frightened. And when they entered the cloud, then from the cloud came a voice that said, "This is my chosen son. Listen to him." After the voice had spoken, Jesus was found alone. They fell silent and did not at that time tell anyone what they had seen. My brothers and sisters, the gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
To be a little informal as I begin by making a couple of observations that you might find helpful to you when you come to pray at St. Matthew's. We are a Catholic community, and so we have different things that we do as Catholics that express the faith that's been poured out in our hearts. So we worship God using all kinds of help. We use music and we sing. We use the Bible and we hear the scriptures. And we as Catholics also believe that when a person prays, it's not just your soul that prays, but your body prays with you. And so this is why in Catholic worship, we have things like posture, sitting and standing and kneeling and all sorts of things. And you get worn out before you come to the end of it. But another thing that we as Catholics do that's somewhat distinctive of us is that we worship and pray with gestures. Have you noticed that? One gesture that you may know, years ago I saw a picture of hands folded like this. Have you ever seen it? It's called the praying hands. It's famous. Everybody loves it. The praying hands. And the hands are together like this. And I bought that picture and hung it in my house because I was trying to be a devoted Christian, a man of prayer. And that would remind me to do that. But then I realized later, this posture, this gesture of folding your hands like this, doesn't come from the ancient church. It comes from the medieval church. For when a vassal would encounter a lord, his lord, I'm talking about lords and ladies and knights and shining armor and vassals. A vassal was at a lower estate than the lord. And when he would approach the lord, he would put his hands together like this. It's a sign of submission. And the Lord would do this. Want to fold your hands? For everybody to see? A little higher. Oh, I like the respect she's showing me. So then, you want to hold that, Diana? So, did you notice Diana is back? Yeah. So then the Lord would come to the vassal, and the vassal would show his respect, and he'd put his hands like this. And the vassal would then renew his vow of obedience to his Lord. That's medieval. So when you pray like this, it's the inferior coming to the superior, and you're submitting to the will of God. That was a popular medieval idea. However, the lords and ladies and serfs of medieval civilization are no longer with us. But in the Catholic Church, we still have these medieval practices. So whenever a priest is ordained, he folds his hands like this, and the bishop does this. And the priest promises obedience to his bishop. Oh, it's very medieval. You know, and that's why I'm dressed up like a holy car right at the moment. It's to impress you, and to impress especially my priest. So I can be a bully and intimidate them, you know, but I don't need to do that because we have all these traditions. Well, I just wanted to mention to you that sometimes you'll see people in church praying this way. This is a gesture, and that's a fine way to pray, but I want you to know where it came from. This is the gesture of surrender to the will of God. That's what this is. And another gesture that you might see is what we call the orantis in Latin. Will you demonstrate the orantis? Come up here, Martha. The orantis is a prayer posture with the hands lifted like that. Now, when I would see people doing that, I thought, oh, it's another crazy Pentecostal. I love Pentecostals. They're so sincere, but they're half crazy. I'm sorry if you're Pentecostal when I made that remark. But I love them. They're our brothers and sisters. Anyway, show them the orantis. This is the orantis. And that's the original gesture of prayer. So the ancient Hebrews and the ancient Jews and Jesus would not have prayed like this. They would have prayed with their hands extended. Abba, Father. You see the difference? Your heart is open. The gesture is powerful. And it would have been unthinkable for ancient Christians to pray like this. That's medieval. And it has a certain theology or idea about God as the ultimate authority. But this expresses the spirituality of Jesus, Abba, Father. We're like a little child coming before our loving parent. That's the way Jesus prayed. And then I noticed something else. As we celebrate liturgy here at St. Matthew's, I'm beginning to see more and more people go back to the orantis. Why are they doing that? I think it's the Holy Spirit restoring that gesture of openness in prayer. Try it sometime. You may like it. Now, you may rather try it in the privacy of your own home. Stand in front of the mirror and look how foolish you look. And then do it in church. But it's okay if you see others doing it. They're restoring the original way that we as Catholics millennia ago used to pray. Is that interesting for you?
Yes.
Oh, you want me to talk to these people too? So, I'm going to show you another gesture I learned in the Philippines. This is Lydia number 1. That's a gesture. And when I learned that in the Philippines, I did it to everybody. Oh, I greeted everybody like this. This is Lydia number 2. And then Father Toti. See, he does it. And so he explained to me that you don't do it to everybody. You do it to people who are superior to you, like the elderly, a bishop or a priest or something of great importance like that. So I learned something. I thought that's a good gesture to have. And so we use gestures all the time to communicate. That's why it's hard just to communicate with a voice or with writing. Something's always lost. But when we can use gesture and body language, we can convey deep meaning. Does this make sense to you?
Yes.
Oh, good. I wanted to take the time to explain it, but believe it or not, that is not my homily. So you have to sit there for another few minutes. But it's okay with me if you want to take a nap. Well, anyway, I'm going to go up into the ambo. Some people call it a pulpit, and I do that just to impress you. Now, there's a statement that's in the ritual now that I have to say. Can you hear me? Good. I just want to before I begin my homily, I just want to reminisce with you for just a moment. I want to tell you something. My father was a scientist. So I grew up in a household where science was taken very seriously. My father worked in a research laboratory. I think I told you this before, didn't I? For a company, and he worked on the scientific research team that invented and came up with the formula for Windex. Before that, people cleaned their windows with vinegar. But now, this company saw the potential if there was a window cleaner that would not leave streaks on glass. So my father worked on that project with the team, and he developed that product. So whenever I see a bottle of Windex, I remember my dad. He also was a part of the team that developed, believe it or not, Drano.
Wow.
So whenever I use Drano, I remember my father being involved in that project. And one other thing he did as a scientist, back in the 50s, people cooked with lard. And they would not use vegetable oil because it was liquid. They were used to cooking with a solid lard. So my dad was hired to work with a scientific team that created Crisco shortening, which is lard without the animal fat. It's vegetable. Now I mention that to you because my dad was also a man of faith, and he saw no contradiction between being a man of science and a man of faith. And that impressed me as a child about my father, who was not Catholic. He was a believer, but not Catholic. He was a Baptist. And all my life growing up, he took me to church every Sunday. I could never get out of it. He was strict. But the thing is, when I became Catholic and started St. Matthew Church years ago, he scratched his head. He couldn't understand what I was doing. What are you doing? This is crazy. But you know something? For 5 years, he came to Mass every Sunday and became a lector and learned the gestures of Catholicism. So if you would have met him years ago, you would have sworn he was a Catholic. He got it down perfectly. That was my father. I mentioned these things to you to let you know that everything is not as it appears. When we come together here in the church for Sunday, we gather and assemble together as the church. Guess what? Jesus shows up. And we like that. We want Jesus to come to our services. He shows up in the readings, and he shows up in the Blessed Sacrament of the altar, and he shows up in you and in me. And for 5 years, he would show up with my dad. Now, the only problem with Jesus showing up, my brothers and sisters, is that he likes to bring all of his friends along with him. And he has some very strange friends. So, I think that what we need to do is learn how to be friends and to embrace people. And in that way, we are sharing the uncreated light of God. Let me talk about this just for a moment. Well, I had a point to my story. You're probably wondering what the point of the story of my father is. Well, when I was a young priest, I would spend all week writing the script of my homily, word for word, because I was terrified to stand in this kind of place and in front of a crowd of people. I was terrified. I liked all the stuff we did as Catholics. I liked the ritual and the liturgy and all that, but I didn't like standing in front of people. It made me nervous and afraid. And so the way I could counter that fear was I would write out my homily word for word, because I could write it. And then on Sunday morning, I would just read it off to everybody. And my dad was sitting in the church, shaking his head. And after Mass one Sunday at St. Matthew's, he came up to me. He says, "Son, I don't want to tell you what to do, but you cannot be reading your homilies anymore. Get rid of that. Just talk to us. Just talk to us." And I was scared to death to do that. But I did. And I stopped writing things. And I just came out and talked to people. And my dad was right. People rather liked that better. But now, because of my stroke, I forget everything. So I had to write again my homily, and my wife kindly printed it out for me. So I did work on it this week. It's all written here, and I just have it here to remind me of things I want to tell you that is very important. First of all, I want to begin with a quote. God is light, and in him there is no darkness at all. God is light. The scriptures reveal to us three aspects of the divine life. God is light, God is spirit, God is love. The essence of the divine life is light, spirit, and love. And so God is all around us, and we can't perceive him with our senses. And his light is all around us, but we do not see it. But on one occasion, he took Peter, James, and John to the summit of Mount Tabor. And while he was there, something happened to him that amazed his disciples. Jesus began to glow. He began to radiate light. Light that the writer says was brighter than the sunlight. It was as if the light of his divinity was shining through the threads and the fabric of his humanity. And he was glowing in the dark. Now, we tried to repeat this by buying a statue of a glow-in-dark Jesus, to remind us that he's the transfigured Lord. Now, something else happens as Jesus is turning into this being of pure light, shining through his humanity. The disciples collapsed to the ground. It frightened them. They'd never seen anything like that. And then, all of a sudden, two other personages just appear on either side of Jesus. And you know who they are. The first one was Moses, the giver of the Torah, the law. And the other was Elijah, the greatest of all the Nebi'im, the prophets. So these two dead men were there living with Jesus in this transfiguration experience. And so, what the transfiguration says to us is many things. Number one, that everything is not as it appears. Keep that in mind. My brothers and sisters, you are solidified light. That's what you are. We are a scientist told me this once. We are solidified starlight. So we too are light. We too are spirits having a human experience right now in this material world. And we are also love. Just like God, because we receive our life from God. God who is light. God who is, what was the second one? Light?
Spirit.
Oh, I was just testing you. Spirit and love. That is what we are, and that is what we must return to be. And so when we think about the Transfiguration, we are reminded that everything is not as it appears. We need to look for the spirit that is behind every action, because every action has a spirit behind it. And we need to be discerning of spirits, and we need to pray that we too may be transfigured, and that we too may behold the glory of Jesus in his uncreated, transfigured light. And if we join our lives with his, we too shall be transfigured. Because Jesus said to his disciples, that's you and me, you are the light of the world. And that, I think, is the gospel of the Lord.
Amen.
I forgot to read my notes.
Shine, Jesus, shine.